Now, as revolutionary as GoldenEye 007, Shenmue, and Star Fox were back in their day, their flaws are unmistakably clear when re-evaluated without rose-tinted glasses. Because of the blocky graphics and janky animations, these classics just can't help but show their age. But because the nostalgia for these gems still rings true, fans are always excited to see their favourites get a fresh makeover. And that's what we're here to talk about today. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 video game remakes no one expected. Number 10. Clock Tower. Resident Evil usually gets the credit for kickstarting the survival horror genre, but it was actually Clock Tower which pioneered the genre. In this point-and-click adventure, Jennifer has to navigate around a creepy mansion and solve puzzles while avoiding the terrifying Scissor Man. The premise was simple, but it was enough to launch a new style of gaming, kickstarting a new franchise and spawning several spiritual successors, including Haunting Ground and Nightcry. But with that said, Clock Tower had one serious problem. It wasn't all that good. I mean, sure, it gets top marks for a nerve-wracking atmosphere, but the gameplay, it is tedious and slow, my dude. Since its sequels are dramatically worse, it's apparent why the series never took off. Despite manifesting a cult following, the original Clock Tower has never been officially released outside of Japan, which is why it's shocking to see Clock Tower actually return. Using the emulator tool Carbon Engine, Sunsoft, WayForward, Limited Run, and Capcom will bring back the Clock Tower remaster to all main consoles in 2024. With so many major companies working on the project, the revision should iron out all of the issues the original had, whilst maintaining Clock Tower's chilling spirit. Number 9. The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. Many entries in the Legend of Zelda saga have been remastered with improved graphics, including Wind Waker, Majora's Mask, and Ocarina of Time, but for decades the Zelda series never had a true remake. That all changed with the release of 2019's Link's Awakening on the Switch. Debuting on the Game Boy in 1993, Link's Awakening quickly became one of the highest rated and best-selling titles on the tiny handheld. Although it received a colorized upgrade in 1998, fans wanted more. After 25 years, Nintendo saw that Zelda lovers were still gushing over Link's Awakening, which encouraged them to devise a modernized version. Even though the remake's gameplay remains mostly unchanged, the aesthetics have had a total revamp. The characters now have a kind of toyetic design, whilst the towns are structured like dioramas. The blurred depth of field focus, although simple in concept, actually makes every single visual pop off the screen, and for the first time in the franchise's history, players can now create their own dungeons. Because Zelda's creators were focusing on a Breath of the Wild DLC, Age of Calamity, and Tears of the Kingdom during this period, nobody actually expected them to find the time to squeeze out a remake of one of the most celebrated entries in the series. Number 8. The Gex Trilogy. As the console war transitioned to 3D, studios weren't just showing off their graphics, but also their mascots. During the late 1990s, developers went into overdrive to manufacture promotable video game characters, such as Crash Bandicoot, Lara Croft, and Spyro the Dragon. With so many characters jostling for the spotlight, there was always going to be a few that were left on the sidelines. Which brings us to Crystal Dynamics' Gex. Due to the platformer's tight mechanics, creative level design, and catchy tunes, a lot of players developed a rather soft spot for the wisecracking Gex. The 3 Gex games were solid, but they just couldn't compete with such superior contenders, especially since the platforming genre at the time was pretty oversaturated. Gex unfortunately faded away, which is why it was a rather welcome surprise when Limited Run Games recently announced that they were remastering the Gex Trilogy. Now at the moment, little has been revealed about the snarky lizard's return, including the remaster's release date. But since Limited Run Games have had success revitalizing Shantae, let's hope that they achieve similar results with Gex. Number 7. Resident Evil 2. After the success of Resident Evil 1's remake in 2002, Capcom strongly considered giving the sequel the same treatment. But since Resident Evil 4 was undergoing an apocalyptic production, it was decided to focus all attention on that project. After Resident Evil 4 was hailed as a masterpiece, Capcom thought it was in their best interest to pump out new entries rather than retreading on previous installments. And because the Undead saga had gradually moved away from survival horror, it was uncertain if a revision of the earlier entries would have had the same impact as before. 4. However, that all changed with Resident Evil 6. Due to unresponsive controls, erratic AI, and bloated action, this clunker was regarded as an unmitigated disaster. Although Resident Evil 2 creator Hideki Kamiya pushed for the remake for years, the ball only got rolling after RE6 bombed. And when Resident Evil 7 was applauded for returning to its horror roots, Capcom knew that redoing the second installment was definitely the right move. Now, Resident Evil 7 may have helped the series get back on track, but the RE2 remake deserves immense praise, perfectly recreating the terror and tension of the original whilst feeling fresh and very, very new. Number 6. System Shock. The System Shock remake had such a turbulent production, its very existence is miraculous. Planned as a mere remaster in 2015, Night Dive Studios believed that they could make a System Shock reboot using the Unity engine. After their Kickstarter campaign nearly doubled their targeted goal, System Shock version 2 looked like a sure thing. Unfortunately, everything went back to the drawing board when director Jason Fader concluded System Shock could only be done justice with the Unreal Engine 4, rather than Unity. Unable to decide whether the IP would work as a remake or a reboot, the whole production went into hiatus. And when Night Dive failed to attain financial support and workers were reassigned to other projects, well, it looked like the show was going to be over. But in 2018, head developer Larry Kuperman assured fans that System Shock was looking at a 2020 release. However, 2020 came and went, with the hype title only existing as a demo. Due to the pandemic, fans had to wait another 3 years before getting their hands on this highly anticipated shooter. And the final result was, well, yeah, it was pretty good, yeah, it's alright, no, quite liked it actually. Although the new System Shock looked and played phenomenally, it failed to update some rather outdated mechanics, making gameplay kind of feel archaic at times. Now, I quite like this, but other people, I can understand their gripes. 2023 System Shock may have fallen short of expectations for some, but it still has to be commended, considering the hell that its developers endured. Number 5. Dead Space. Upon launch, Dead Space immediately made a name for itself thanks to the space horror's focus on atmosphere, tension, and pants-wetting jump scares. Knowing that they had a moneymaker on their hands, EA greenlit a sequel, this time developed by Visceral Games. With this entry surpassing its predecessor in nearly every way, Dead Space was shaping up to be the next big thing. But the franchise seemingly imploded when Dead Space 3 was released. Due to its lack of variety, erratic pacing, and disjointed structure, the threequel was a swing and a miss. After it underperformed in sales, plans for a follow-up were scrapped entirely. When Visceral Games was shut down in 2017, a continuation of Dead Space, well, it looked very unlikely. And with the series lying dormant for a decade, it came as a shock to many when Motive Studios announced a Dead Space remake. Because this project was being overseen by the guys behind Star Wars Battlefront 2, well, fans had every right to be skeptical. But not only did 2023's incarnation of Dead Space match the original, it improved in many departments, especially that bloody turret section. The latest Dead Space is the best kind of remake since it reignited interest in a beloved IP, meaning that it's likely that this cosmic saga will have a resurgence. Number 4. Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp. For over a decade, Intelligent Systems' War franchise was exclusive to Japan. Although the developers were hesitant about releasing the 7th entry, Advance Wars, on a worldwide scale, this decision paid off massively. The turn-based strategy title was a global hit, inspiring various sequels and spin-offs. But something very strange happened in 2008. After Advance Wars Days of Ruin was released on the DS, the series suddenly, well, just stopped. Even though the installment was well received, met its sales quota, and inspired a 3DS remaster, Advance Wars kind of just fizzled away. For the next decade, there wasn't a word or a whisper of the tank-blasting property making a comeback. As such, fans accepted that Advance Wars' moment in the sun had come and gone. Now, 15 years after the last entry released, WayForward released Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp, a Switch remake of the first 2 games. Character artwork, animations, and the map had been spruced up, all whilst maintaining the original's cutesy vibe. The new mechanics spice up gameplay for hardcore fans, while the new casual mode allowed easy access for newcomers. With Reboot Camp doing well financially and critically, let's hope that it inspires the developers to devise a brand new Advance Wars game in the not too distant future. Number 3. Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. Because of Metal Gear's legacy, it's bewildering how the iconic espionage series hasn't been remade to death. Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes is the only complete overhaul in the franchise, and that came out nearly 20 years ago. Although fans have been pining for Konami to revisit the classic games for decades, that avenue has appeared less and less likely recently. After Metal Gear Survive tanked critically and financially, Snake's future became uncertain. With Hideo Kojima no longer playing a part in the company, revisiting the titles associated with him definitely became a problem, and with the developers focusing more on mobile and arcade titles, fans worried if they would ever see Snake, Big Boss and Raiden again. But in 2021, it was reported that Konami intended for Metal Gear to come back in a big way. After 2 years of silence, fans wondered if they were actually being set up for disappointment again, but in May 2023, Konami officially announced that prequel Snake Eater was receiving a full-scale facelift. Put together by Konami Digital Entertainment and Virtuous, Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater will be the retooling of the classic game from scratch, but this time with the audio from the original cast, which will remain unchanged. Number 2, Super Mario RPG. In hindsight, Super Mario RPG could have easily been another random spin-off starring Nintendo's legendary mascot, but due to its creative combat, hilarious banter, head-bopping jingles, imaginative puzzles, iconic characters, and surprisingly epic story, this 3D RPG is often revered as one of the best Mario entries ever. But since the Nintendo and Square game wasn't released in Europe, a lot of Westerners didn't know that Mario RPG existed until it became available on emulators and virtual consoles years later. Because millions of people didn't get the chance to play with Mario, Mallow and Geno when this wonder debuted, fans have been begging for a Mario RPG remake. However, few players genuinely thought their wish would be granted, considering Nintendo rarely likes to recreate Mario titles from scratch. So, when Mario RPG popped up in the recent Nintendo Direct, many fans safely assumed that it was an announcement that the original was being added back to the Nintendo Switch online service. And because of this, it was actually a dream come true for the fanbase when they realized that Super Mario RPG was being remade with modern graphics, revised gameplay, and a newly arranged soundtrack, and I for one cannot wait. And number 1, Final Fantasy VII Remake. Final Fantasy VII single-handedly revolutionized the entire role-playing genre. Because of this, there was no entry in Square's beloved series more deserving of a revisit. Now, during the early millennium, players seemingly had their prayers answered when Square announced a PS2 remake of Final Fantasy VII, 8, and 9. When the do-overs for the 8th and 9th installment were scrapped, cloud lovers worried that Final Fantasy VII would suffer the same fate. So when a PS3 tech demo of Final Fantasy VII's opening was unveiled at 2005's E3, such concerns were momentarily quashed. Sadly, the biggest advocates grew restless when the project didn't materialize. Over time, it looked like this coveted title would never come to be, since Square was more focused on Final Fantasy XIII, Dragon Quest sequels, and Zero Day Attack on Earth. No, I've never heard of it either. But when Final Fantasy VII's remake went into full production in 2015, fans should have been relieved. However, Final Fantasy veterans have been burned way too many times, which is why many were expecting Square to pull the plug on the whole operation. But not only did Final Fantasy VII Remake become a reality, it successfully recaptured the magic of the original in a way that nobody thought possible. It may have taken nearly 20 years, but the gaming community finally got their wish. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 video game remakes that nobody expected. I hope you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me over on the Future Game Show or FGS for all of my daily gaming content going forward, and I hope to see you over there.